Good morning and happy Sunday.
Good morning.
It seems the title of my message today kind of is a God thing. Right now we have a stumbling stone. Unfortunately, we're up? No. Okay. We have a stumbling stone. Our computer is not working with the screens today, so unfortunately the beautiful slides that I have for you today, you'll just need to Google them when you get home. But in God's hands, it will all work out, all will be well. Before I do start the message this morning, I do want to bring to you greetings from our new pastor, Pastor John Snape and his family. They are very anxious to come and join our family, and in joining our family, we are going to celebrate with them. I don't think giving a little preview of what we have planned for that. July 1st is when Pastor John and his family will be with us, and we're planning on having a good old-fashioned church picnic. The United Methodist Men are going to provide the hot dogs, and we are asking you all to provide a side dish, a salad, or a dessert. So please remember, this will be outside. Jell-O may not be the best thing to bring. But anything else, will work. So please be mindful of that. And I would like to ask the children now for a favor. Pastor John has two children, Corbin, age 9, and Noel, age 6, who will be joining our church family also. And many of you have moved probably at least once in your life, and you know how hard it is to move. You leave old friends, and you're scared. You're coming to a school, a neighborhood where you don't know anybody. And it's hard being 9 and 6 to have the courage to reach out to someone else. So I'm asking the children of our church if you would please take the first step when they arrive here in July. Go up and introduce yourself to them, tell them what school you're at, because at this point I'm not sure which school his children will be going to, but it would be nice if they knew there might be a friendly face for them to see when they arrive at their new school. So kids, if you would please make a point to go up and introduce yourself to Corbin and Noel and take them out to the playground, bring them into our family. So this is summer, and we see many of you are here, and I'm glad to see you today, but a lot of our members are probably on vacation. And any of you who travel know travel is filled with stumbling blocks. Anything from missed connections to flat tires to luggage that goes walkabout on its own, to, if you go to Europe, the dreaded cobblestones. Those things will reach up and grab you in an instant if you're not careful. We were on a vacation one year that my husband and I subtitled The Tour of the Walking Wounded. There were two ladies in particular who the cobblestones got. And they freely admit it was our fault. We weren't watching where we were going. One lady was taking pictures and the other one was walking backwards. One lady ended up in a wheelchair for the rest of the trip. She kind of bunged up her hip. Fortunately, nothing was broken. And the other lady did a face plant. And she looked like she did 5 rounds with Rocky. And while it may seem strange, that got me thinking about stumbling stones. And that led me to today's message of stumbling blocks to stepping stones. In Germany, we encountered some stones that are called Stolperstein, which literally means stumbling stone, or metaphorically, a stumbling block. Now, the Stolperstein are about a 4-inch concrete block that has a brass plaque on top of it. And this plaque bears the name of the name and the life dates of victims of the Holocaust. The Stolperstein project was initiated by the German artist Gunter Deming in 1992, and it aims to commemorate the individuals at exactly the last place of residency or of work that was freely chosen by that person before he or she fell victims to the Nazi terror, or euthanasia, eugenics, deportation to a concentration camp or an extermination camp, or who may have escaped persecution by emigrating or by committing suicide. As of December of 2019, 75,000 Stolperstein have been laid all over Europe, making the Stolperstein project the world's largest decentralized memorial. The name of the Stolperstein project invokes multiple allusions. In a metaphorical sense, the German term Stolperstein can mean a potential problem. The term to stumble across something in German and in English can also mean to find out by chance. And the term was deliberately chosen by Deming to provoke thoughts about a serious issue, be it the tragic events of the Holocaust or the daily problems that we encounter in our own life. Stolperstein are not prominently placed. The first time we saw them was in Passau, and we would have walked right over them or right around them had our guide not specifically pointed them out to us. Other people may have found them by stubbing their toe on them because they're even taller than the cobblestones. But that was also done deliberately. They are meant to be stumbled or discovered by chance, only recognizable while passing by at a close distance or by stubbing your toe or interrupting your pace. In contrast to other memorials, such as large statues or walls that are erected to honor Holocaust victims and statues for other purposes, Deming put them where they can be easily, in contrast to centralized memorial places, which according to Deming can be easily avoided or bypassed. We've all walked by, another statue, another wall. It just becomes part of the landscape. But the Stolperstein represent a much deeper intrusion of memory into everyday life, just as our problems intrude on our daily living. So often events come into our lives that seem to be almost unbearable. And it is in these times that we are able to see more clearly God's hand in our life. When people or circumstances seem to be laying a trap for us, we find God at work for us. It is then that He takes these things that are meant for evil and turns them into blessings. Now, how can these stones be turned into a blessing? Well, they force us to think about the terrible cost that war brings. That there are no winners when hatred becomes the focus. They are meant for us to remember that these were the lives of people who will never know what their potential was. Sometimes there are tragedies in our life that even make us question if God is even there. These are really tough times when we ask, if God, then why? And these times will ultimately strengthen our faith. We may not understand it at the time, but if we truly look to God for the answer, He will give us peace if we will trust Him. Stumbling stones are sometimes put in our way to cause us to remember that life's path may not always be smooth and easy, but that our first step in crossing over the stumbling stone is to go to God in prayer. And it starts with prayer as the first step. Max Lucado, in his study Before Amen, reminds us that the first thing in any problem is to take a breath to go to God, to ask, what can I do? Will you please help me? This prayer time gives us time to calm down. And we are much better problem solvers when we are in a calm place. So when we find ourselves stumbling over the stones in our life, our first step is to go to God. And our scripture reading today, Romans 8, verse 28, tells us that God is always working to make our lives better. He doesn't say that all things are good. He says that he causes all things, good or bad, to work together for good. Now, it may not seem evident at the time, but nonetheless, it's true. So let us look at some events in the lives of two people from Scripture that illustrate exactly how God takes these stumbling stones in our lives and turns them into stepping stones to Him. Well, let's look first at Joseph and his dysfunctional family in Genesis. The story of Joseph and his brothers illustrate how God's plan for his kingdom is carried out through the lives of his people. And God often uses those who are against us to move us to the place where He wants us to be. This is the place where we can do the most good for His kingdom. If it were left up to us, we would stay right where we are and where we are comfortable. But I'm sure that the circumstances of Joseph's life were not comfortable. And I don't believe that the life of a slave would have been his first choice of a lifestyle. But God, in His infinite wisdom, knew that a little discomfort now would be worth the eventual outcome. Often God uses those that are closest to us to move us into that position that He wants us to be in. We don't always see that, and at first we may be very resentful. But sooner or later, we will know what He has planned for us. Like Joseph, we need to be willing to forgive those who do us harm. God has a plan for each of us to follow. And if we do not follow, He will make a way to put us into His plan. I think the story of Joseph and his brothers were really the inspiration for the t-shirts that I'm sure you've all seen that say, I'm the oldest child, I make the rules. I'm the middle child, I'm the reason we have rules. And Joseph definitely had to be the inspiration for it. I'm the youngest. Rules don't apply to me. Because we all know the story of Joseph and how he, as the youngest, went against the traditions of the day. But his dad never seemed to do anything about it. So Joseph's brothers became jealous of him, not just because of the sibling rivalry that we often see in families. This was a full-blown, resentful jealousy. So much so that they plotted against him. And the story illustrates how God used those men and circumstances to bless His people. Joseph was persecuted by his own brethren. He was sold into slavery and counted among the dead. But then, Joseph was sold to the captain of the guard in Egypt. And while serving the captain, he was falsely accused of a crime and imprisoned. But like the story goes, and next, while in prison, Joseph interpreted the dreams of two of Pharaoh's servants who were imprisoned with him. And the Pharaoh at the time had a very disturbing dream that he wanted to know the meaning of. And so he asked several of his advisors what the meaning of this dream could be, but nobody could interpret it. Well, one of the servants who was eventually freed from prison remembered Joseph and his talent of interpreting dreams, and he brought Joseph to Pharaoh's attention. Joseph was so successful at interpreting the Pharaoh's dream that the Pharaoh elevated him to his second in command. The dream that the Pharaoh had foretold of a 7-year famine. And so Joseph used that information to begin to put together a food plan of how to store food up, where it would be safe, what they should store up, so that Egypt could weather the famine. Well, during this time, Joseph's own people were experiencing the famine, and they had no such storehouses. So the brothers came to Egypt hoping to be able to buy food to save their own country. And who should they find? But Joseph, their own little brother, in the prime position to help. But of course they were afraid, because they knew what they had done to Joseph, and they were afraid that he would seek revenge on them. But God intended what they meant for evil to be for their own good. What happened to Joseph can be seen as a harsh stumbling stone, but God turned them into stepping stones to bring about the reunion of Joseph and his brothers and to bring food to his starving people. God used those events to put Joseph into a position of turning evil into a stepping stone for good. We can also look at the story of Paul and Silas. How many of you sort of feel a tightening of your body when you hear the word evangelism? Or you are asked to go out and to tell your story of your relationship with God and with Jesus? We all get fearful. We all think, I can't do it, or if you're of my age, it was drummed into us, you don't talk about politics or religion. That's just a taboo subject. But there are thousands and thousands of people out there who need to hear our story. We need to share that good news. And if we feel this way, can you imagine how Paul must have felt at his time? But he summoned up the courage to pass that stumbling stone of fear, to go about preaching wherever he went. But when he came to Philippi, he and Silas, while looking for every opportunity to tell others about Jesus, became so popular, so much so that some of the people felt threatened by their words and their deeds. And so they began a campaign to discredit them and have them thrown into prison. Now, how many of us today would risk the gospel, talking of the gospel of Jesus Christ, for prison? I venture to say that there are very few of us, particularly when you might have heard the recent news of a 4-year-old child in North Korea who was put into prison because his parents owned a Bible. The fact is that God's plan of evangelism is not confined to the comfort of the pew or the sofa that we claim as our own. There will be times where if you follow his plan, you may end up in jail, like this little 4-year-old, or you may end up in the hospital or some other uncomfortable place that you choose not to be in yourself. But we always take the example of Paul and Silas to heart. They were in prison for their evangelism, but they used their time in prison to minister and share their faith to those who were in prison with them. Prison is a big stumbling stone in life. But rather than sulk or cry, "Oh, woe is me," and beat their chest, Paul and Silas sang and praised God. They ministered to the people who were in prison with them. And as a result, God moved. The jail was shaken. There was a violent earthquake, and all the doors of the prison were flung open. But the jailer rushed to the jail in fear of his life, because if those prisoners escaped, it would mean his life. The Roman centurions would come and pass sentence on him. However, when he got there, Paul assured him that everyone was still there. No one moved. And because of their witness, the jailer and all of his family were saved that day and were baptized by Paul. That was the miracle that God was bringing about through his plan of evangelism. God took the stumbling stone of persecution and turned it into a stepping stone for evangelism. Stumbling stones can come in many sizes, shapes, and forms. But we must trust God to turn those stepping stones into a path that we walk with Jesus. We can let them tear us down. And we can stop our walk, or we can allow God to place them as firm footing for us to walk on. Remember the words of Joseph in Genesis 50, verse 20. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about the present result. God will always bring the faithful to victory over the stumbling stones. And this just has to be a God thing. Because now I'd like to give you a short lay leader report from our annual conference. It was announced that finally there will be a general conference meeting of all of the churches in the United Methodist Church worldwide in April of 2024. Now, no matter what happens in general conference, it will not change the way we do church. Church is us, and church is love. And following the way of Jesus taught us how to do church. And to bring it down further, the church is local. It is how we react and care for our mission field. Both the bishop and the conference lay leader stated that we should not double down on what we have been doing, but instead to use the stumbling block of disaffiliation to start to do something new, to focus beyond our walls, to touch the hurting world. We cannot continue an inward focus. Because this session we did have the sad duty to approve the disaffiliation of 34 churches of our conference. Within our own district, the following churches have disaffiliated: Bracken United Methodist Church, Bulverde United Methodist Church, San Antonio Korean, San Antonio University, San Antonio Harlandale, San Antonio Oak Island, Coker United Methodist Church, and Seguin First Church of UMC. Now, this is a stumbling stone for our denomination. This affiliation has taken us away from the mission of Christ into a discussion among ourselves. And right now, we have hurting people over the disaffiliation of their church. Again, God has shown us a way, though, to turn this stumbling stone into a stepping stone. We have been called by our bishop to become what they are calling a lighthouse church and congregation. And this is a way to reach out to those who no longer have a church home. Because there are people out there who wish to remain in the United Methodist Church family, but their church is disaffiliated. And think of them for a moment. Some of these people whose church disaffiliated was the church where they were baptized, where they were confirmed, where they were married, where they worshiped for years, brought up their children in that church, and where they hoped to have their funeral service performed. But that church no longer exists for them. So we need to reach out to those hurting and grieving people who wish to remain inside the United Methodist Church and invite them to become members of our family remembering that we not only need to welcome them, but we also need to embrace them and comfort their loss. We continue to be a strong conference with 270 worshiping congregations within our conference. And our focus this year will be threefold. We will be focusing on community health and wellness, focus on social justice issues, and the immigration and border relations. So now is the time not to dwell on disaffiliation and what that means for us, but instead to raise our eyes and to look forward to what will be new as we continue being the United Methodist Church.